Thank you everybody for joining. Merci. I hope you're all doing well today, wherever you are. If you're on the West Coast, East Coast, in between. And we have lots of people joining, so I'm just going to give one more moment and then we will get started. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Grace Riley. I lead Government and Public Relations here at the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium. I'm honoured to welcome you today to CUTRIC's Renewable Natural Gas Transit Fleet Study Results webinar. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you today for you to be able to learn a little bit about what CUTRIC has been doing recently. Today, I am joining you from Toronto, and I would like to take this moment to acknowledge we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis people. We acknowledge Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. So before we get started, let's do some quick housekeeping as we are on the Zoom platform. So just to let you know, it's a webinar format, so you are all muted. If you would like to see or to get involved, feel free for you to use the chat function. We also do have live transcripts enabled today, so if you would like to use that, you can press the little button down at the bottom. You can also provide reactions, so if you're excited by some of the results that you'll see today, feel free to give a thumbs up, a clap, whatever that may be. But really, it's a great afternoon and day to welcome you all today. So with that, I would like to pass it over to our Program Manager of ZEB Consulting Services and Business Development, Parvati Pillai, who is going to give you a bit of an overview about why CUTRIC completed a study on renewable natural gas. And that is going to build us up very nicely to go through the actual results of the study. Who will be going through that is Roberto Sardenberg, our Senior Lead of Data Science and Knowledge Management. So with that, over to you, Parvati.
Thank you very much, Grace. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us here to learn more about a milestone project that the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium, CUTRIC, undertook over the past several months to look at renewable natural gas as a tool to electrify, or to decarbonize public transit fleet. At CUTRIC, as you may know, we are committed to making Canada a global leader in low carbon smart mobility technologies and to help commercialize and advance the technologies that enable our systems to do that. In this project, we are very much privileged to have had the pleasure of working with innovators all across the continent, actually, to scientifically establish an environmental and economic business case for renewable natural gas, RNG, which you are going to be hearing more about today, to serve as a zero emission fuel to help transition from fossil fuels to zero emissions. In this project, we partnered with innovative transit agencies such as Calgary Transit, Hamilton Street Railway, Riverside Transit Agency, TransLink, and others, and assess their operational data to look at factors ranging from fuel usage, vehicle maintenance, greenhouse gas emissions based on different propulsions across the transit fleet to understand whether RNG can serve as a zero emission fuel. When we typically talk about decarbonization, we focus our attention on battery electric buses and hydrogen fuel cell buses. And currently, the Zero Emission Transit Fund program, which Infrastructure Canada has released, is not considering like RNG as a tool set that can help electrify. So it's not a eligible expenditure that is considered if you're transitioning away from fossil fuel to use RNG. However, we are hoping that this scientific and neutral assessment of RNG as a possible zero emission fuel would enable us to open the doors in the future towards enabling these fuels to be considered as zero emission alternatives to hydrogen or battery electric as well. RNG is a very powerful tool to help achieve zero emissions. And as you're going to find out, it's going to be making it accessible and economic and environmentally friendly transition pathway for transit to move away from, polluting diesel fleet. Basically, you're going to find out more about how that is possible from my colleague Roberto. So I do want to pass it to Dr. Roberto Sardenberg, who is our senior lead for data science and knowledge management, to guide you through the results of our analysis. Over to you, Roberto.
Thank you so much, Parvati, for the kind introduction, and welcome all. I'll try to guide you through the results that we got from the study. So again, welcome. My name is Roberto. I'm a senior data scientist here at CUTRIC. I work at the forefront of predictive modeling and empirical data analysis. I was working very closely with this project here. So in terms of an agenda, I will quickly touch base on defining what is RNG for the folks that probably are not aware of this technology. And then I will do a little bit of an overview of the literature scan that we have made for this project as well. And then after that, we are going to dive into the results of the data analysis per se. So we essentially gathered data from 5 trans agencies, and we combined with some results, some lessons that we learned from the literature scan, and we did some assumptions for RNG as we are going to present here. And we arrived at carbon intensity factors for RNG and CNG at different plants, results and extrapolations for the cost of that fuel for operating the buses with that fuel for the participant trans agencies here. We have looked at RNG at carbon neutrality, which is a mix of RNG and CNG, a blend. Like we look at the proportions to arrive at carbon neutrality. We look at the case in which the agency would run with 100% RNG, which can be carbon negative, as I will explain in a bit. And we look at the carbon intensity factor comparison overall with diesel, a battery electric bus, fuel cell electric bus, and CNG powered with RNG as well. And hopefully we'll get some time for questions at the end as well. So if I start my presentation here by just defining RNG, I'll be very superficial, but still the terminology that we are going to use here when we are saying CNG, compressed natural gas, we are usually referring to the fossil fuel-based natural gas, which is naturally occurring. And when we speak about RNG, we are talking about the product from decomposition of organic matter from other human activities. And those activities would include, for example, food processing waste, agricultural waste, manure, municipal organic waste, and landfills. Those are some of the key activities that generate organic matter. And we consider all of those in the current report. So RNG is essentially the fuel that we can get as a result of decomposing organic matter coming from a lot of activities, but mostly these here are key for these technology. So essentially, instead of just having that organic matter decompose and the results of that decomposition, which are also a different number of gases here to go to the atmosphere, the goal is to capture those gases because that will compose, will be actually one of the constituents of the renewable natural gas RNG. I say that because usually when the organic matter is decomposed, approximately 60% of that is methane, CH4, and the other 40% is carbon dioxide. Now, methane is what we look for here. It is the natural gas that like we are used to. We just have to essentially upgrade that gas. So there's a process of biogas upgrading to get approximately 95% methane and only 5% carbon dioxide. That would be like the desirable concentration of methane to reach like regular natural gas, like similar to the fossil fuel based natural gas. So the fuel per se, like methane, is chemically identical to the one found in the fossil fuel reserves. So that is one beauty of this technology here. You can actually build. You can actually blend one with the other in whatever proportion that you might like, and technology will work just as the same. And you'll be avoiding the emission of that methane, and you'll be like reducing the carbon footprint by a lot, as I will like show some numbers later on as well. But hopefully that gave you at least like some very, very high level overview of what is the technology. I mean, how like RNG is produced. And there are a lot of technical considerations here in terms of methods of production. So for example, you can have what they call a biodigester, which is essentially enclosing the organic matter, as you can see in the illustration here, and just like filtering out the carbon dioxide. But there are other methods of production as well, like gas thermal gasification, but those are less efficient, and I will not like dive much deeper into the different methods here. Now, if I move to the literature scan to provide you with some of the key findings that we were able to obtain. So first, CNG as a fuel is a proven technology. So I'll dive a little bit deeper into that item. But yeah, it is like everywhere in the world, and there's no issues with with BEVs and fuel cell electric buses as a comparison. For example, they are emerging technologies, so there's a lot of adjustments to be made, but CNG, it's quite ready. Natural gas is widely available in Canada. So in the full report, you can see a little bit more of that, but in here, we are just mentioning it here. We have like here in Canada, plentiful resources of natural gas. The natural gas vehicles emit less tailpipe emissions than diesel, and that usually ranges from 10 to 15% less. And I'm comparing CNG, the fossil fuel CNG, with diesel here. So even if you don't have RNG, if you only have the fossil fuel based CNG running in a vehicle, you'll be emitting from the tailpipe 10 to 15% less CO2, which is a gain per se. The natural gas vehicles emit less pollutants than diesel overall. I mean, it's not just about CO2. There's CO or carbon monoxide and other components as well, sulfide components, nitrous oxide components, and those are harmful. Those pollute a lot, and natural gas vehicles emit less of those as well. Natural gas is compatible with conventional engines. So I don't see a lot of natural engine vehicles here in North America, which is probably a good opportunity for like these technology to become more widespread. But from where I came from, I came from Brazil. There's a lot of people that convert their passenger cars from gasoline to CNG vehicles, and It's quite economical. They buy a kit and like the motors are ready. They don't need to redo their motors to be ready with CNG. They just need like a relatively cheap kit for that conversion. But of course, the end goal here is transit. We are promoting transit. That's just an example of how the vehicles, like the motors, the mechanics is very suitable for CNG as well. Now, there's a stable and relatively low commodity price for CNG in Canada, so that is an advantage as well. It's like more stable and less costly than diesel, as I'll show some numbers later on. RNG is chemically identical to CNG. I think I briefly touched upon this item here. So you can blend RNG and CNG in whatever proportion that you might like. RNG can be net zero carbon or even have a negative carbon intensity. And I'll explain a bit why does have a negative carbon intensity actually means, because it might be a little bit surprising at first, but it's quite easy to understand. Natural gas buses are approximately $50,000 costlier than a typical diesel bus, but still approximately $25,000 cheaper than a diesel electric hybrid bus. So it's not quite expensive as other zero emission technologies such as battery electric buses and fuel cell electric buses. So it's a good option in that sense as well. So overall, there are potential savings of around $250,000 per vehicle if you consider the full life cycle of a vehicle, which is 16 years considered in this study here. And I'm doing that comparison between like diesel buses and CNG only. I'm not even including RNG in the process. So if you just transition from diesel to CNG, it will be over the life cycle of a vehicle, $250,000 per vehicle cheaper, approximately. Now, natural gas buses are also quieter on average than diesel buses, 10 decibels. And for those who are not familiar with this unit of measurement here, it means that natural gas buses are approximately 10 times quieter than diesel buses, because it's a logarithmic scale. Now, let me dive a little bit deeper into only two of those points here to just show you some numbers. So if you look at the first one, CNG is a fuel with a proven technology. If you look at the global deployments of natural gas vehicles, you see that the Asia Pacific region, they have more than 20 million natural gas vehicles, and that is including everything from transit to passenger cars and all. Latin America, from where I came from, it's 5.5 million and so on. Europe, more than 2 million. Africa, 300,000, and North America, only 200,000. So you can see there's quite few natural gas vehicles, and there might be like a very good opportunity, especially with RNG as a viable zero emission option to like explore that market share in here. And I'm showing the number of fueling stations in here as well, but yeah, they kind of follow these distribution more or less here. Now, if I also look at the carbon intensity of RNG, because that is an important question here, that's an important aspect. It can be net zero or even have a negative carbon intensity. And what does that mean? So the important fact here is that those activities that I just showed you, like with forest residues, with municipal solid waste, with like manure, animal manure, those activities will naturally release emissions to the atmosphere. And when you take that organic matter that will like end up in a landfill or in a pasture or something, it will decompose there. Instead of decomposing that organic matter there, you decompose it inside a biodigester. For example, you are capturing those methane molecules that would otherwise be emitted through other activities other than transit. And the interesting fact here is that methane has a potential global warming approximately 20 times higher than CO2, carbon dioxide. And that is the reason why RNG can be even negative in the carbon intensity, because not only the emissions are, the tailpipe emissions, for example, are lower than diesel, but it will actually capture a lot of the emissions from other human activity. So overall, it's an effective negative carbon intensity in some instances, as I will dive a little bit deeper into that aspect as well in a bit here. So moving on to the data analysis per se, the data analysis portion of the work here, we have to do some assumptions for RNG because it's such an incipient market here in Canada, but in the US, they are more developed with RNG. And there's a good study from the ICF, the study on the use of renewable natural gas in the greater Washington, DC metropolitan area, a study from 2020. They have a very comprehensive study of the cost and the emissions of that fuel across the US. And what we did was essentially to follow that study and to make an averaging process across like different regions of that country so that we can extrapolate the results in here. And you can read all about it in the full report as we're gonna show in a bit. But essentially, we have in here a price for the RNG per se. We are showing units here in Canadian dollars per diesel liter equivalent. For different sources for RNG here as an example, landfill gas, animal manure, WRRF is a water resource recovery facility, so essentially water treatment plants, food waste, so all of those different methods of getting RNG will like incur in a different cost, but it will incur in a different carbon intensity as well. So if you look, there are two ones like landfill and WRRF, they are positive, but there are two ones, animal manure and food waste, that have a negative carbon intensity factor. So essentially for every diesel liter equivalent that you can produce and run, like burn the CNG and run to propel your vehicles, you're actually removing almost like 8 kilograms of CO2 for each diesel liter equivalent if it's like animal manure, or like 1.45 if it's food waste. And other interesting thing to do here as well is to see what is the blend ratio that will achieve carbon neutrality, because usually RNG is a little bit more expensive than CNG to produce, not by that much. I will show in a bit as well. But if you essentially mix animal manure RNG in the ratio of 22% RNG and of course the other 78 CNG, you'll be carbon neutral. So you don't need full RNG. You only need relatively low concentration here of RNG if you go with, if your sources of RNG is animal manure, but you'll need a little bit more if the source is food waste, because the carbon intensity for food waste is not that negative. Now, if you're looking at the other methods of production, you cannot really achieve zero in this case here, but it's still like a very small carbon intensity factor, and can be a good option as well. And here I'm showing the price at carbon neutrality here also in terms of dollars per diesel liter equivalent. And I will show you some comparisons as well to help in this process here. Okay, okay, this figure is a little bit blurry. I'm sorry for that, but hopefully everyone can still see. So we are showing here the carbon intensity factor for different blends of CNG, RNG here. So if you look at the red curve here, which is essentially constant, that is for diesel. So diesel will have a carbon intensity factor of just below 4 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per diesel liter equivalent. But if you look at the zero mark here, that is zero RNG, so full CNG. So the fossil-based natural gas is already like at zero RNG here. It's already significantly below the diesel carbon intensity here. But of course, when you add more and more RNG to the process here, your carbon intensity starts to drop. And depending on, like, again, the source of your fuel, you'll drop more or less, and you can achieve negative carbon intensities with the fuel blend. So for example, animal manure that we just showed before at 22%, it will become negative, but with food waste, it will require 66%, if I'm not mistaken, to become negative, or to cross the line to be carbon neutral, actually. So again, depending on the source of your RNG, you can be, your emissions can be quite low or negative. Now, we're gonna discuss a little bit of like what did we do with all of that information, all of that literature review, all of those studies of carbon intensities with the data that we were provided by the agencies in this study here. So we got operational data from 3 years, essentially 2018, 19, and 2020, from the 5 agencies participating in this study here. And we tracked their distances, their cost of fuel, cost of maintenance. Some of those agencies provided more detailed data and some a little bit less detailed data, but we were able to combine all of them into a single piece of methodology here. And we are presenting here the aggregated data for the 5 agencies. So if you look at the distances that we tracked, there's more than 300 million kilometers tracked with diesel and more than 140 kilometers for CNG vehicles. None of those are running with RNG. There is a pilot already running with CNG in Ontario, but we are, the data analysis for those vehicles here are only for CNG, pure CNG. Those are the average fuel efficiencies. If you would like to take a look at those numbers for those who are more technical, it's important to consider the efficiency because CNG vehicles are slightly less efficient from a measure of kilometers per liters or diesel liters equivalent. But the difference is not that much, as you can see by those numbers in here. And of course, the agencies provided us with the cost of the fuel, with the maintenance costs for the vehicles. And I should say, CNG buses require less maintenance. It's less costly to maintain those buses. So if you normalize all of those numbers on a distance basis, you'll see that we have here the average fuel cost and the average maintenance cost per kilometer for diesel and CNG. And when you add the two together, and I'm labeling that addition here as total cost. So total cost for us here is just the operations with fuel and maintenance. But still, like when we compare that total for diesel and CNG, we have more than $1.40 per kilometer for those agencies, again, in those 3 years as an average for diesel, so $1.40 and approximately $1.10 for CNG. So as you can see, if you just compare CNG with diesel and you just restrict the cost with fuel and maintenance, it's already 30 cents per kilometer cheaper. And the numbers that you are seeing here, they include an estimation for the compression of CNG as well, because not all of the agencies were able to provide precise data for the cost of compression, but some of them were, and we also vetted those numbers with our literature review, and we did some calculations, and at the end, the cost of compression was around almost 13 cents per kilometer, and those are added in the fuel cost for CNG, already included in this fuel cost for CNG in here. Now, if you look at the blending of RNG and CNG to achieve carbon neutrality, which is a very interesting scenario to consider, we are looking at this table here. So what we are doing essentially is to combine the data that the agencies provide, the cost, all of that, with the literature review results for the cost of production of RNG and for the carbon intensity factors as well, all of that, we combine those, and we arrived at these numbers that you are seeing here. So we have diesel, again, $1.40, CNG $1.10. If you include 22% RNG with animal manure, it's not going to drive that much the cost up. But if you go with food waste, 61% to achieve carbon neutrality, it's a little bit more costly, still cheaper than diesel, but a little bit more costly, 1.28 cents. And there's another option in here that will actually achieve carbon neutrality as well. So for example, almost 90% landfill and 10% animal manure, it's $1.23 per kilometer, and it will achieve carbon neutrality. Now, so the diesel cost for all of those agencies is in here, as you can see in the graph. The diesel cost per kilometer, or the CNG, is a little bit lower, as you can see. And when you include RNG, the costs drive up a little bit on average, but not that much. So you can achieve carbon neutrality with all of those, or with one of those options here, and not even be higher than the diesel cost of the current time frame for this study. Now, I actually plotted also some kind of extrapolation here, because, like, as you all are probably aware, the diesel prices have been surging recently quite rapidly. And I just included in here an estimation of the cost of diesel per kilometer if the price point of diesel was $1.6 per liter, which was close to the diesel price point before the war in Ukraine started, just before that in Ontario as a wholesale, in Toronto, in a wholesale basis for diesel. So it's not a one-to-one directly comparison here, because like the data actually it's 2018 to 2020, and we are comparing with like also like current values, but still it provides us with some clues of the trend, right? So if even at that time, going with RNG was not as cheaper, was not as costly as diesel, right now that the diesel prices are surging, that scenario should even improve going forward. Now, we also looked at one interesting case here in which the vehicles are running with 100% RNG. And the numbers here show us that the cost, they will surpass the diesel costs, not by much. I mean, it's slightly more the cost experienced by those agencies for running with diesel. But again, if you consider the current diesel prices, again, it's not like a really fair comparison, but yeah, the tendency is to have even running with RNG can potentially become cheaper than running with diesel, and like you can achieve negative carbon intensity factors. We are showing here, and I'm sorry, the names, the transparency here did not work very well, but we are showing here a comparison for the carbon intensity factors of running with full RNG here. Again, diesel, CNG, RNG with landfill, food waste, and animal manure here. Okay, on a per kilometer basis in this case. So yes, we also included some comparison between the fuels here. And of course, you have the diesel, the CNG, and the RNG becoming like quite near zero or even negative. But we included as well some carbon intensity factors for those buses running with battery electric buses or fuel cell electric buses on a kilograms of CO2 per kilometer basis. And the important thing to note here, which is, I'm sorry, these numbers here should be like the provinces. All of those numbers here should be the acronym of one province, and the slides got disconfigured somehow. But the provinces with like poor, or should I say a less clean electricity grid, they have a quite high carbon intensity factors, even with PBs and FCBs, because to generate that electricity or to generate the hydrogen from electricity as well, you'll be emitting a lot of carbon dioxide. And there's a few provinces here which PBs and fuel cell electric buses emit like really close to zero. But again, RNG can be even negative. So I'm sorry for the missing labels here, and you can see those in the report when we get these out for you. So I'll briefly mention some conclusions here. So RNG is a viable option in transit decarbonizing efforts. There are operational savings that are possible at neutral or negative emissions, which is great. Like having those two happening at the same time, it's not easy, but it is possible, quite possible with RNG. It can be directly injected into the CNG pipeline, so you can leverage the already installed infrastructure. You don't need to expend a lot to put those projects forward. RNG is an established technology. If you notice, 30% of all the 450 million kilometers tracked in this study were covered by CNG buses. CNG buses are comparable to diesel in range and refueling time, so it will not become like a disturbance in your operations if you're a transit agency. The CNG buses are much quieter and emit a lower amount of particulate matter. The CNG buses are powered with RNG, might be the only viable option if you're in a province in which the electricity grid is not that clean. And even if you are in a province with a clean electricity grid, RNG should be leveraged, because there will still like be blocks or services that it will be very hard to service with other technologies such as BEVs or fuel cell electric buses because of a range limitation issue. So there's also that. And with the recent diesel fuel price escalation, the operating buses with RNG are getting more and more economical, regardless of the source of RNG and like the blend ratio that you choose to use. And that was all for me. I hope we have time for questions, and I'll pass it back to Grace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roberto. That was an amazing presentation. And I think with all of our participants on the line, they will have appreciated that insight. So if the results of the study presented today are of interest to you and your teams, well, we've got you covered. We're going to be releasing the full report shortly for all CUTRIC members and non-members to read for free. So a free report, feel free to download that as soon as it comes out. Stay tuned for upcoming communications releasing this report, and that will be through email or social. So yeah, we'll have you covered there as well. But in the meantime, for today, we'll be following up with each of you to share the slide deck as well as the recording of this webinar. So please feel free to share it with within your teams and then within your networks via social media or your own newsletters. We're very happy for this information to be shared. But before we close today, and as Roberto said, he hopes there's time for questions. We do have questions. So let's open the floor now. We'll welcome back Roberto and Parvati. If you want to close off the presentation, Roberto, I will pitch some questions that we've received through the Q&A function. And if you have yet to post your questions, please do so now and we can spend some time on them. So first up, we have a question from Dave Suave. Is it possible to include current costs of CNG due to the recent price surges? Additionally, considerations for CNG cost increase due to increased usage.
Okay, I think so. I mean, not probably for this issue though, because we want to get this report ready so that folks can start reading. But of course, we can look at that. And if you want to stay in touch, we can definitely look into those latest updates as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Roberto. And we have a second question from Sarah Stadnick. Did the carbon intensities for RNG account for the efficiency of the CNG engine?
Yes. So yes and no. I mean, yes, we certainly are considering the efficiencies of both the diesel engines and the CNG engines as well, because we got the fuel consumption of the vehicles from the agencies participating in this study. And no, because like the carbon intensity is a number that relates to the fuel per se, not necessarily related to like one particular motor, even more because like it will depend, like each engine from each manufacturer will have a different energy efficiency. So the carbon intensity factor for a typical fuel, like for example, for the CNG, we'll consider a full life cycle analysis, which considers all of the emissions incurred in the production, in the compression, in the distribution, and in the burning of that fuel in the engine. If you have a less efficient engine, you'll just require more fuel with the same carbon intensity, if that makes sense to you.
All right, thank you very much, Roberto. So we have some more questions coming through the chat. Next question here is from Mike Kopansky. Did the calculation for lifetime savings per vehicle include increasing difference in cost for the carbon tax for diesel versus natural gas?
Okay, no. So that was not considered yet. So which is actually a good case, a good business story, because with the carbon tax, these difference between the costs of CNG and diesel should even improve the business case for RNG, right? So yes, we did not consider those, and it should get the results even better.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Roberto. I see one more question in the chat. Feel free to keep them coming. From Theo Van Kutten, we have, is the learning curve for maintenance technicians from diesel engines to CNG and RCNG reasonable?
Okay, so we did not specifically look at that issue for this study, and you will not find a lot of information in the report when you get to see it. But from my personal experience with like the different projects that we have here in CUTRIC, I should say the learning curve is minimal. Those vehicles require less maintenance than diesel, and the maintenance is not that much more specialized than the diesel vehicles. So I would say no.
Parvati, anything to add on that question?
I think Roberto mentioned it correctly. The experience that we have is when transit agencies are planning to transition from diesel to electric mobility, then there could be that learning curve, because we are equipping our operators to work with high power equipment. In this particular case, the transition from diesel to RNG is more seamless in that case. And particularly from our experiences in the States as well, a lot of transit agencies did use compressed natural gas. If the transit agency is using compressed natural gas, then it's just a utility supply of renewable natural gas that needs to happen in the pipeline supply, and there is no change for the operator themselves in terms of learning more. If you are comfortable using CNG, then there is no difference that from an operational standpoint that RNG would make, but it enables you to have the business case, the environmental business case, and the economic one that Roberto pointed out. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so I don't see any more questions. Oh, no, I'm wrong. One's just come through from Vincent Morales. Do you think the upcoming federal clean fuels regulations or clean fuel standards will drive more adoption of RNG buses in Canada?
Well, if I may go first, and I'll invite Parvati as well, but I should hope so, because I think RNG is a solution that is so underlooked. And again, when the clean fuel standards come out and the business case improves, it will be an even more attractive option. So I should hope so that people will be looking more and more in deploying RNG in the matrix. It's not like there's just one single solution to transit decarbonization. It's a matrix of different technologies, and RNG is certainly one of those.
Yeah, maybe go ahead, Parvati.
Just wanted to add one point to that, because when we started looking at zero emission transitions a few years back at CUTRIC through our zero emission bus consulting services, we have had transit agencies say, Parvati or Roberto, we are just interested in looking at battery electric alone, with depot charging alone, or just hydrogen alone, because we are not sure if we can maintain a mixed fleet. Currently, with our experience, that we are finding that more and more agencies are coming to us and saying, we need to look at all options that would enable us to decarbonize our fleet. And we know that we are going to have to maintain a mixed fleet consisting of a share that is electrifiable using battery electric, a share that works with hydrogen fuel cell, a share that works with renewable natural gas, or even renewable diesel. So our transit agencies are having this open mind towards maintaining a fleet that has complementary solutions, because the end goal that is driving them to move forward is the fact that they wish to decarbonize for their communities, which is the same sentiment that we are sharing. So, in the future, we are hoping that the funding programs such as the Zero Emission Transit Fund or allied funds would be able to consider renewable natural gas as a viable third option to decarbonize the fleet, and it would be covered, particularly for the agencies who want to consider it as a primary choice as well, to avoid going in the capitally intensive route of battery electric or hydrogen for other reasons as well.
Perfectly said, Parvati. All right, we have one more question here right now from Giovanni Calvopina. Do we know the average age or life to date mileage of different types of buses?
Well, we do have quite some extensive data. I don't have all of those at the top of my head. So if you want to stay in touch, I can probably provide you with some averages. I would not disclose the specific data from a transit agency or nothing like that, but I can tell you about the averages for the all of the experience, all of the data that we got in other projects in here as well.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So seeing no more questions, Roberto, I just ask you to share the final slide, which is our contact information. So if you have found this presentation today helpful and you do have more information or do have more questions and would like to follow up with us, Roberto is your guy. Please feel free to reach out to him. His email is here, and we can also pop that in the chat for you so you can copy and paste. But I just want to say thank you to Roberto, to Parvati, and to our transit agencies on the line who took part in this study. Without you, it would not be possible. So final words from you, Parvati, before we close up today.
Yes, I do want to thank our transit agency partners who supported us, because we have asked for quite a lot of data and they have supported us. I cannot conclude this by not thanking them, our stakeholders at Riverside Transit Agency. I see them on the line here, so thank you for supporting us. Our colleagues at TransLink, our colleagues at Hamilton Street Railway, our colleagues at Calgary Transit, and other transit agencies in the States. Thank you to everyone who has supported us. Without your help and support, this study would not have been possible. And I'm super glad that we got to this particular point with respect to establishing this business case for the country. And your support has been incredibly helpful in that regard. So thank you to everyone.
Okay, merci. Thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and stay tuned for the final report that we'll be sending to you for free. And after today, we'll send you the recording and allied slide deck. Take care, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.